Hello and welcome back to the Start the Glamping Business podcast. Today we have Andrew Murphy and Dionis Rodriguez. They are the co-founders of a brand new glamping resort, Sojourner Glamping. It's going to be 144 units in Virginia. The pilot is planned for 2024 with the full resort expecting to open in 2025. It's a really interesting concept. They went through a hell of a journey on the permitting side of things, so we're going to dig into that today. But just to start off, Dionis, could you tell us a little bit more about Sojourner Glamping, what it's going to be, where it is, and just give us the background of the resort?
Sure. So Sojourner, this is Sojourner Glamping Company. Our first pilot property is going to open in Greene County, Virginia. It's 10 minutes away from Shenandoah National Park, an hour and 50 minutes away from Washington, D.C. It's 144 units, and it's a complete glamping resort. So you're going to have multiple pools, a very large experiential pond, spa, kids club, restaurants, and many activities for families, couples, and folks that just enjoy staying in the outdoors.
And what kind of glamping units are you looking at using?
So we're going to use tents, and our tents are unique. They are 1, 2, or 3 bedroom tents. They're going to be heated. There's going to be an amazing bathroom. These are the same tents that Richard Branson uses in his Moroccan resorts. And just the entire stay it's going to allow you to really connect with your loved ones and with nature.
Amazing. And so is it really going to be a kind of a family resort rather than a sort of solo couples retreat?
So we will have the ability to have great activities for families and also for couples. We'll effectively think of having 2 sections. For example, we have 2 pools. We'll have a pool complex or area for couples, and we'll have one for families as well. So we'll have the ability to properly accommodate both families and couples.
Okay, and what sort of daily rate, nightly rate are you looking to charge?
Yeah, so it's that's going to depend on when throughout the year you're coming, but Andy and I want to make sure that this is affordable for families and for people that we're encouraging to come into nature, but it's going to vary from, let's say, $150 all the way up to north of $500, depending on when.
Sounds good. And then going back a little bit to how this concept came about and actually how you guys met. So tell us a little bit about how you guys met, how you've worked together in the past, and then what led to or what sparked the idea to get into the glamping business.
Sure. I mean, the way that Andy and I tell the story, this really started in 2005. And that's when Andy created a South Africa trek for Harvard Business School students. And he convinced my wife and I to go along. We had an amazing time. And this was really Andy's initial start of planning Zana Lodge. So Andy was a Peace Corps volunteer, worked for the World Wildlife Foundation. And during his time in Ghana, one of the things that he wanted to do was create a way for locals to create hospitality in a way that would provide a means of living. So he came up with an idea called Zana Lodge. Back then, he started to plan it as part of the reason why he went to Harvard Business School to begin with. And in 2020, when COVID hit, and I was thinking of a way to properly transition my company, Crimson Rock Capital, and I thought of, well, who do I know in the glamping business? Andy was the first person that came to mind. So I reached out to him, and we started the process of trying to study and understand the glamping market here in the U.S. And we walked away extremely positive about the opportunity of the space. So we started the quest, and that's when it started. But Andy, what else would you like to add to that?
Well, I'm going to touch on a question you're going to ask later as well. The irony of Dionis reaching out, he says, Andy, you're the only glamping guy I know. And at the time, I hated the word glamping. So Zana Lodge is a 25-room safari resort in the middle of a national park with elephants. And in many ways, safari lodges were the first glamping resorts. They were just never called as such. And so I had actually banned the use of the word glamping. And when Dionis reached out to me, I was like, well, I guess I kind of am the glamping guy. And what we decided to do is, although we don't really love the term, we're going to embrace it and we're going to redefine it. And we don't think even the glamping products that exist today match what we think it should be. And so we're going to use Sojourner to show people what we think glamping should be.
Yeah, and this is a conversation that's actually cropped up a few times on this podcast. We've had quite a few recent guests, particularly the ones who are doing the really, really high-end resorts. We had Ben Wolf on from Anera, who in peak season are charging $1,800 a night. And they kind of are hesitant to use. In fact, they just don't use the term glamping. And I think, is it similar for you in that it almost comes across the term glamping as a kind of almost like a budget offering, and you're trying to sort of raise the standards a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I mean, look, the product here in the U.S. is very nascent, and in some ways, U.S. glamping, I'll call it staying out in nature, we're behind the rest of the world. And it's so early on that the way that Andy and I describe it is we're probably where the hotel industry was in the 1950s and 60s, right? There's really no real segmentation as such. All the product that exists are able to charge pretty significant rate because there's a lack of supply. So instead of not using the term, we decided to embrace it and hopefully redefine it. That's why we started with a four-star product that will really allow folks to go out and really enjoy the beauty of nature.
Okay, and so moving from how this concept came about onto actually putting it into practice, we always talk. Well, we quite often talk about permitting on this podcast. We have a lot of people who went through a really bad ordeal. We had some people who it was just a complete breeze for. Now, you were definitely on the kind of former end of the scale. You had an absolute nightmare. When I was doing the research, I think I saw you had loads of neighbours in uproar. You had 3 hearings, a lawsuit. So I'd love for you to just sort of run us through the whole story, what happened, and just detail the kind of opposition that you came up against. But ultimately, you won. You've been approved, and things are in motion. So tell us a little bit about that story.
I'll jump on this one and then let Jonas fill in some of the holes. I mean, the best thing to tell the story is, up until the point that the opposition came, I had always seen myself as a community person. I spent 20 years doing community engagement in Ghana. So I saw myself as a community person, not as a big deep pockets developer. And so I had started following the local newspaper, the Greene County Record, and I turn on an article and it says, "Say no to glamping." And it's describing Jonas and I as these big pocketed New York City developers. And I was like, wait a second, they're talking about me and I'm the man in this situation. And what had happened to us is that word had gotten out about us looking at a property in this particular community before we had ever applied. And what we now know that we didn't know is our timing was off, and that there are a lot of battles today and across the United States in rural communities about Airbnbs in residential neighborhoods. And so there had been just a big fight in that neighborhood about that issue, and then we popped up. And I sometimes describe it as, imagine that George Washington has defeated the British in the Revolutionary War, and he hasn't disbanded the army, and then a new person popped up, and that was us. And one of the things you had asked us about is mistakes. So one of the things, we were buying a property that had been a former housing development. And the developer of that property wanted to reach out to his neighbors to say, look, some people want to do this as a glamping resort. And he shared a hypothetical map that we had that showed what's the total possible units you could fit. Something we were never going to use. And the mistake we made was that he shared that map, and it lit a prairie fire in the community in April of 2021. We didn't really know about it until October. So we were behind the 8 ball. And so we actually have a really forward-thinking social and environmental product that we're developing that's going to be massively beneficial to rural communities. But none of that mattered because we were already in the public eye as evil developers with a big, massive project. And so we went all the way to what became a meeting in a high school in April of 2022 that lasted 6 hours with all kinds of interesting things. And we were denied that property on that one. And Jonas and I knew that we were going to lose that vote, but we realized there was such a huge conversation that our project was creating in the community about what's the future of our rural community, that it was important for us, as expensive as it was to have that meeting, to allow that conversation to come on. But one of the things that we did in the meantime, Nick, is I went into full Peace Corps mode. So I based my family for 6 months from December 2021 all the way through April 2022. I would sit myself at a place called Mabel's Market every Monday and advertise on Facebook and say, I'm Andy from Sojourner, come and talk to me. And I would hear opposition, people would come, I made a lot of friends, and what ended up happening is we got a lot of supporters out of that. We met another real estate developer who said, or real estate agent who said, look, you guys are never going to get approved on this first property, but we have another one. And so we started in January of 2023 just working on that entire project. And so while we got denied in April of 2022, by June of 2022, we actually got another approval on this new property that we're working on now.
Yeah, and there must be some, we hear crazy stories about Facebook groups being started and mass meetings. Are there any, funny, crazy stories that have come out from the sort of neighbor uproar throughout the whole process?
Okay. I was gonna let Jonas add some details, but yeah, they were 2 different genres of no glamping signs all over the community. There were all kinds of accusations in the meeting. I won't say the worst one, but at one point I think they likened me to Jack Nicholson's character in The Shining in the middle of the meeting, which is my personal favorite as well. And then everyone had these bright yellow T-shirts on with grizzly bears, even though grizzly bears are not native to the Shenandoah, saying keep the area idyllic. But the irony of this entire thing is that one of the biggest goals of this community is to preserve the rural nature of the community. And what's happening is old farmers are deciding not to farm. They're selling their land. The easiest thing to do is to turn it into a housing development because you don't need approvals for that. And we put out in our slide that helped us get approved to say, look, here's how many dozens of eggs. I think it's like 850 dozens of eggs I'm going to buy a month, 2,000 pounds of beef, like 1,500 pounds of chicken. If you want to keep rural farmers in business, you need real buyers who are going to buy that produce, and that's what we're going to do. And that's one of the things that helped turn the tide for us. Jonas, do you want to add some stories there?
Yeah, look, what I'll add is that we expected that zoning was going to be difficult, right? I mean, I've been in the real estate industry for a very long time and have invested in many different parts of the US and the world. But I think this goes back to your question, right? Like just the misunderstanding on the word glamping. What does it mean to different people, right? And if you live in a community and a peaceful, beautiful community full of nature, one of the last thing you probably want is just chaos, right? And there are a lot of campgrounds out there that that are a bit chaotic, at least to the locals. So when you say glamping, that's what people think about, right? They think about home values going down or things like that. Not that I'm saying those are fair things to think about, but that's what people expect. So we knew that that was going to be a challenge from the beginning. So that's also part of one of the many reasons that we decided to make Sojourner, at least in the beginning, to be a 4-star product. Because what we want to do is add value to communities, right? We want to increase real estate prices. We want to have the ability to invite people and to go out and be part of these communities, to spend their dollars, to have a great time, as Andy mentioned, to support local farmers and create employment and things like that. So, we weren't really surprised about what happened. But we are very grateful that we have the opportunity to go and bestow a lot of the the reasons why we're creating Sojourner to a community, despite the fact that some folks are not happy now, but we think that eventually the community will understand what we're trying to do.
Hi everyone, Nick from Glamping Tech North America here, and I've just got a very quick message to announce some extremely exciting news. Since launching in July 2022, Glamping Tech North America has made a name for itself in the North American glamping industry. We've consulted on over 40 glamping projects, accumulated over 47,000 podcast downloads and plays, and we're now ready to take the next step. And with that, we're absolutely delighted to announce that we're beginning the process of developing our own glamping projects. We want you to be involved. There are more details to come, but for now, we're taking expressions of interest from prospective investors. We're so excited to get this going. It's been a long time coming, and we can't wait to get you involved. So all you have to do is fill out the form in the description of this episode, and we'll be in touch with more information very soon. We can't wait to hear from you, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Yeah, and you both come across as kind of experienced, sort of determined guys, and I'm sure, you would have made it work one way or another, even if this particular sort of location didn't work. But was there any point where you were like, okay, this is getting really difficult now, and almost kind of considering just giving up altogether?
I think for me, the point was when I realized that the people voting to determine whether they were going to give us zoning approvals were perhaps not all considering the benefits that we were trying to create in the community, right? When it just seemed like it was political, right, and not about what's in the best interest of the people, right? I think after that first time that we lost, I was pretty upset. And Andy remembers, I was like, look, if we're going to come and add all this value and they don't want it, then maybe we shouldn't do it. But, Andy walked me off a ledge, and we continued, and eventually it worked out. But yeah, sure, we're trying to do the best that we can, and a big part of why we're doing this is to add value to society, not only to just create a place for people to stay.
I think to add some color to that, Nick, I mean, I think what helped me was that I had been through the ringer in creating my lodge in Ghana. So there were multiple times in that project that I was going to walk away and didn't, and then was happy with the results. And I think that helped me stay in the game here. But just to give color to what Jonas said, so we lose this vote after midnight, and then we have a meeting with this real estate agent and the tourism developer in the community at 7 a.m. the next day. And Jonas was done. He was just out of the game. And we agreed. They said, look, give us 2 weeks. Let's see if we can make some project progress. We think we can get the votes on this particular project. And we kind of just said, okay, we're not gonna spend any money, we're not gonna do anything. And they came back and we went in with a lot leaner approach. But what helped us is we addressed all the issues that were raised against the first property and the second property. And so that helped. And I think I think we'll stay. I mean, there's going to be more bumps in the future than we've even experienced today. So, I think the good thing is we have a good partnership and we'll each pull each other off the ledge in the times that we need to do so.
Yeah, and you've given a couple of insights as to maybe how the tide was turned and you went from complete opposition, losing the first vote, to sort of making progress. Was there one thing in particular that you would put your eventual success down to?
I think that from a rural focus for people in a general level, I think putting in the time to make the relationships. And so what I didn't do then that we would do in any future thing is make sure you know what the local political situation is very well. And you need to meet someone who knows the community well before you ever start anything and get some guidance. And we've used that in other areas and it's been tremendously helpful. I think we got a lot of credit for just putting in the work. And so even there were people who didn't like me and still don't like Sojourner, said, well, we just want to give Andy credit because he showed up, he talked to people. And so I think putting in the work and listening is always worth the effort that you would put in.
Yeah, now I'll add something to that. Look, I think from the beginning we were trying to do what's in the best interest of guests and the community. So when you start off from that with that intention, then and you put in the effort, I think you'll be successful one way or the other. Maybe even if not in that specific location, eventually something else will work out.
And were there any key people in the county that you were were your points of contact and that helped you get people on side eventually?
There were several over time. I think the person who promotes tourism in the county was tremendously supportive. There's one particular real estate agent who was the one he had been in all the local positions, including the board of supervisors. So he really gave us the inside knowledge. I think the biggest thing for us was a particular business leader who's now actually running for office in the county decided to stick his neck out for us. And it was his support in a time where he didn't have to, there was no benefit to him taking the risk. And what you find is as you start to add those people in, it starts to grow. And what ended up happening is we had people who were our friends and supporters who were also in some of these Facebook groups with all the negative chatter going on, and they could counteract that. Most of them got kicked out of those groups as well, which was interesting. But I think it was building a coalition. Jonas and I talk about building a tribe of supporters for this family of Sojourner, and that's really what happened there as well.
Yeah, and so that's the bringing almost a tribe together on the county side of things. In terms of your team, was it you two leading the efforts, or did you have architects, attorneys? Like, what was the team on your end?
Well, it was interesting. We actually had a bigger team when we lost, and that's what made it so expensive. And we trimmed it way down. We ended up becoming almost family friends with the owner of the property we were denied on. He's been a construction manager for 50 years. He's now on our team as an engineering consultant. So he definitely was crucial. He drove the rest of it. We actually went in with a really low cost model on the second approval, but we now do have a great local architect who's a local investor and owns a winery, and we're building that local coalition out as well.
Yeah, and what I'll add is, look, we have the designs were great. We had a fantastic team, but to give credit to the person who was really leading it, most of this was being led by Andy Murphy. And he became like a Peace Corps volunteer community organizer, and he just willed it into existence. Like he said, he basically moved to the county and was willing to hear every single person who was against or for it, right? And without that type of mentality and intention, this just would not have worked. So my hat's off to Andy.
Andy, was that something that you enjoyed, or was it kind of just a necessary thing that you just had to do to get over the line?
I've always loved being on the community side of things. It's the first time I've been in a position of being the community enemy, so that was a new thing. But I'm also just I'm a student of politics and psychology, and so I just want to understand why people do what they do. So I found it intriguing, and I found it as I just probably also because I'm a competitor, I took it as a challenge. Like, wait a second, we can do this. So I do like that part of it, and understanding what's going on, because I think that if you understand that side of it, then when you're creating the solutions in Sojourner that are going to help the community, you can really land those as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned, especially for the first vote, you had quite a large team on your side, and you no doubt need site designers, engineers, etc. Was there a rough cost that you could give us for how much a permit?
Should we? I don't know. I mean, 300 grand comes to mind, but I don't know if that was the total cost.
It was probably north of that, but look, at the end of the day, like, we have investors and we're fiduciaries, so we just have to be responsible with other people's money, which is why for property number one, we thought we were going to get it approved. I mean, this is adding so much value to the community. We just didn't foresee a situation where you can come with such a great plan and it doesn't work, but it didn't for political reasons. But for the second time, we just had to effectively minimize that as much as possible. But a lot of money.
Yeah.
Something that could be illuminating for people doing this in the future. So the first lawyer we had was actually helpful in that she recommended that although the county wasn't asking for it, we do a traffic impact study. And we also do an economic analysis study from a third party. So rather than us selling our numbers, a third party can look. And actually, that traffic study and that economic analysis helped us even on the second property and even helps us because there's a lot of good just traffic generation information and economic benefits that will hold true to every sojourner property, not just the specific location. So that was a really helpful piece of work that we put money into.
Yeah, and having gone through this long, drawn-out, stressful process and come out the other side, would you have any advice for someone else going into that process, particularly for maybe developing a larger resort like yours?
Well, I think it's really important to have a team of people that have done this before, that have the experience. Make sure that you have enough capital to start and finish the process because it's going to get very expensive. And make sure you're prepared to start and finish it. I mean, in our situation, as you know, Nick, we were even sued. So not only did we have to go through all the designing, all the due diligence, all the studies, create and pay the team, but there was also a legal process. So it's very time consuming. It takes a tremendous amount of effort, a big team, and it's costly.
You've got to tell us a little bit more about getting sued.
Sure. So, well, what happens is at the end of what the way it at least works in rural Virginia is you have a 30-day window after a board of supervisors makes a decision to file a lawsuit. So one of our major antagonists from the beginning joined a coalition of four other property owners to basically sue the county for the decision they made, but they had to name us and the landowner as in the lawsuit. And we were decided to bring on our own lawyer because we weren't sure that the county would represent us the way we wanted to. That was filed July of 2022, and it took until just about 4 weeks ago to get thrown out by the judge. We knew it would get thrown out because we knew we had about 40 years of legal precedent in Virginia. But what it does do is it puts a question mark into how forward you can go on your future planning. And it's just, and we knew that it was likely an attempt to try and stall us. But we knew we had the facts on our side and we went through the right process. And what actually happened is we've actually become really close to the landowner. And just as a crazy coincidence of serendipity, the landowner graduated from Harvard Business School the year I was born in '73 and lives in the Dominican Republic where Dionis is originally from. So if we hadn't gotten denied on that first property, we would have never met Ken. He's actually in the US right now and he's coming to the event we're holding this evening. So all's well that ends well, right?
And so, moving on to the actual operation of the site, clearly you're going to be hosting a lot of glamping guests, but you've also mentioned that you're looking to doing weddings and events. So is that something that you're planning on doing from day one?
Well, day one, we're going to open a pilot. It's a 10-unit pilot, hopefully mid 2024. So the idea with opening a pilot is just to walk in all consumers, lenders, investors, and really introduce, I'll say, the U.S. to this type of glamping option, which is a little more upscale, right? Just to make sure, and then take everyone's comments and feedback and make sure that before we scale it to the full resort, we know what consumers want. But during this pilot time, we are going to do weddings and we are going to host couples and families as well. But it's a very small, I'll call it a MVP from the beginning. But look, at the end of the day, it's a full resort, and we are going to be open the entire year, and we're going to service a pretty large clientele that includes couples, families, wedding, corporate retreats, etc.
Yeah, and what really turned us on to the wedding opportunity was during the process of the opposition, we were on the news on a regular basis in Charlottesville, and all these other landowners started reaching out to us. Wineries, a boys' boarding school, a wedding event venue saying we need accommodation for our guests. And what we stumbled into, Nick, was that there are just no properties within that area of Central Virginia that can host a 150-person wedding and house all the guests. So when we open in Green, we'll be the first in that area to do so. And the side benefit of weddings is that event space allows you to host corporate retreats. So you're not entirely reliant on weekend stays of glamping guests. You can fill in the week as well.
Yeah, and that's, that's a pretty common story in terms of the opportunities for not just glamping, but combining it with weddings and other places. We're looking to potentially develop our own resorts and wedding venues, wineries, ranches, those kind of places. They want more accommodation options, and it's a similar kind of clientele and
Right.
similar kind of like budgets, and it just works so well. And I think that's one thing we'll see develop as time goes on, as the industry develops, is more and more glamping sites at these like wineries and wedding venues, and just feel it, because the demand is there, but the supply isn't. So I think we'll eventually start to catch up. But I think it's smart what you guys are doing, and it's it makes complete sense. So, you've got the plans. You're going to do like a pilot program 2024, and then hopefully fully opening in 2025. But that's just the start, right? You've got bigger plans for the company as a whole. The industry is only going one way, so I'm sure it's going to be very successful. So, tell us a little bit more about your future plans for the company.
Sure. So look, when Andy and I decided to do this, one of the first key things, once we realized how promising the opportunity was and how nascent the industry was, is that we wanted to scale. We didn't only want to do one property. So we are working on multiple properties right now, but the first one is going to be Greene County, Virginia. And our goal is to grow and have multiple properties outside of Washington, D.C., to move and to grow on the East Coast, to then go national, international. We think of ourselves as the Marriott of glamping. We think Marriott does an amazing job, and we're trying to compare ourselves to someone in the industry that is aspirational for us. So our goal is really to scale and to eventually franchise, if we don't exit and sell to a private equity company or to Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, or a group like that. But our goal is really to scale and create a product for the everyday consumer that the everyday consumer loves.
And the way that's going to manifest is we're gonna have a cluster of properties in the DC area. We're not sure what that final number looks like, and then we're going to grow up and down the Appalachian Trail, heading up north and south. So that you can think of the Poconos, the Catskills, heading down to the Smokies. So we think there's just a lot of runway just based on population factors on the east coast of the U.S. But eventually we want to be national. We'd love to be international. We've had friends from business school trying to get us to Trinidad and other places, but we're trying to stay focused.
And is that expansion process, is that going to, are you just all focuses on the 2025 launch for this particular location first, or are you getting the wheels in motion for that expansion already?
Yeah, we have the wheels in motion for the expansion, but we want to make sure that we can test out the product with the pilot and do that first property. But sure, the wheels are in motion. We have properties we're looking at outside of DC in addition to Greene, and also in New York, and as Andy mentioned, there's interest from other folks that are trying to get us to be involved in other properties. At the right time, we'll pay attention to that, but we are super focused on ensuring that we get it right the first time.
Amazing. It's like we had Zach Boozer Cruz on recently, who's kind of a podcaster. He interviews a lot of Airbnbs, unique outdoor stays, and he said, basically, he speaks to a lot of people with these massive ambitions, but the first thing to do is obsess over that initial model and get it right. And it sounds like you guys are doing exactly that with that pilot program next year. So I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more from you, not just in the next couple of years, but in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So if anyone wants to sort of get in touch, whether it's to express interest in staying with you or potentially helping you with the company grow, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, if you go to sojournerglamping.com, you'll find us. There's a way to connect with Andy and myself via our website.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys. As I say, I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about you, and I'm sure we'll be interviewing you again, once the first site is up and running and once you've got several more in motion. So I think it's going to be great to follow your story. But for now, thank you for coming on the podcast.
And Nick, I think what we'll do is we're going to invite you over to record a podcast from Sojourner when it's open. How about that?
Hey, I will do anything for a free holiday. So yeah.
All right. So you're on. Consider it granted. Jonas can't take it back. So.
Great being on your show, Nick. Thank you so much for the opportunity.